Hey everyone, Anthony Venuti here with In Touch Mortgage Solutions. It's Friday, Finance Fridays, and thank you again for clicking and thanks for tuning in. On this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about co-signers and guarantors. When do you want a co-signer? What does a co-signer do? And what are the implications of a co-signer? Stay tuned, you don't want to miss this. We get a lot of questions when it comes to guarantors and co-signers. What are the differences? What are the implications and what does it mean for the borrowers as well as for the co-applicant or co-signer as well as for the guarantor? And there are differences and we're going to talk a little bit more about those differences in just a moment. Now it's important to understand that with the evolving and changing marketplace right now, a lot of clients who have purchased a pre-construction home, whether it be a condo, a town or semi, even a detached home, might have been faced with delays and their closings may have been pushed out above and beyond where their original closing dates are. And this poses a very big problem. For many Canadians who were supposed to close on a specific date, they may have lost out on their pre-approved rate, as generally pre-approvals are good for anywhere from 60 to 120 days. And obviously, if you lose that rate, you need to go back and qualify at the current rate that is being offered by that institution. And that could pose a problem because qualifications have become more challenging over the last 7 months as the Bank of Canada has continued to increase its policy rate and as fixed rates continue to rise. So it's important to just point out that whatever the contract rate is currently, you have to qualify plus the 2%. And generally right now, most clients are qualifying at 7% plus for that mortgage. And a lot of clients who may have qualified when they originated their purchase may find themselves in a situation right now where they do not qualify. And this is why we wanted to have the conversation about a co-signer or guarantor. Now there is a difference between a co-signer and or a guarantor. Now a co-signer can be simply reviewed or viewed as a co-applicant, someone who's going to join the parties on the actual mortgage and on the title of the property. A lot of banks will want this particular person to actually be on title as they will have speaking power on the property. Now it's important to understand that someone being added to the deal is going to have basically this share of the property registered to their name, which means they're going to see that on their credit report, and if they were ever to conduct a title search of their name, they would find that that person owns or has a share in that property. Now when you go through the process of closing with a co-signer, it is important to understand that you can speak with your lawyer about representing that share accordingly. There are different ways that a lawyer can register that person. They can do it as tenants in common, joint tenants, and they can even register that person at 1% shareholder. But it doesn't matter what that percentage is, that person is on title and does have the ability to speak on the property, giving the bank a little bit more legs to stand on in the event something happens, as they have these three people on title. And depending on the lender that you're working with, all three parties will have that mortgage reporting back to their credit bureau. So what it means for the actual co-signer is if that person doesn't own a home or they're looking to purchase and buy a home in the near future, or maybe refinance, restructure, even apply for a car loan, that mortgage will pop up on their credit bureau and it could impede their ability to move forward. So understanding that is very important as we're having this conversation with a lot of younger clients who might find themselves in that position where they need to add a parent or sibling to the deal in order to qualify. Now, a lot of times parents will help their children by doing this in order to get them through the door and in order for them to potentially avoid the ability or the cost of losing out on that deposit and potentially facing legal action on that new construction closing. But it's not limited to just new construction. A lot of times we'll see clients who are purchasing home in this market, and because of the qualification, they'll need to basically make the application look better by adding a co-signer. Now it is up to the lender themselves in order to determine whether or not they can add them as a co-signer or as a guarantor. So there are a lot of differences in between that, and we'll get into guarantors in just a moment. If you're looking to better understand your particular situation and if that person can be a guarantor or a co-signer, it is dependent on the application and the lender, and speaking to your mortgage professional about your particular situation can help save you a lot of time and money. So now looking at how a guarantor works. Now from my experience, guarantors are only on the mortgage. They are not on title. But that doesn't mean that they does not report to the credit bureau. So Equifax and TransUnion will generally have that reporting back to the credit report as a liability. But this is very important because it could depend on the lender that you're working with. Some lenders do report and some lenders do not. This is why it's important to speak to your mortgage professional to understand which lenders you're working with and who it will report to. A guarantor is mostly seen on an insured deal, with lenders that allow a guarantor on an insurable deal with less than 20% down, or it's on a 25-year amortization and it's insurable, because most of the banks will want that person as a co-signer as opposed to a guarantor. So this is a very big distinction. But as a guarantor, and if you're eligible to put that party or that person on as a guarantor, they are not on the title of the property. So the application or the purchase agreement does not need to necessarily include that person. So it is only limiting that guarantor to that particular lender. And if, for example, that client and that person doesn't have that reporting to their credit bureau, it won't impede them in the future. So there are some differences between them. But more importantly, it's understanding how to remove a co-signer or guarantor down the road, as we get this question asked often. So if you're needing or required to put on a co-signer or a guarantor, you can have that person removed down the road if it is required or if that person can be removed from the deal. And it all depends on the qualification. A lot of times the client will ask, say, hey, we were short income or bad credit, or a little bit of a situation happened and we needed to add that co-signer. How do we remove that person? It is up to you, the individual, to approach the lender and basically reapply or basically requalify to ensure that your income and credit is all valid. And in that case, they can actually remove the co-signer or the guarantor. Now, obviously, if the person is a co-signer, it's important to note that not only does it have to be removed from the mortgage perspective and basically what is representing the lender's side, but it's also important to understand that you need to remove that person from the actual title itself, and you would need a lawyer. And generally there are costs associated with it, and depending on the share allocation, obviously there can be some land transfer tax implications, and obviously that is an important conversation that you would need to have with your lawyer before making any moves to remove a party from the actual mortgage and from the actual title. Where a guarantor doesn't require that, basically you would only approach the lender, and the lender would reapprove the parties or the applicants and remove the guarantor based on the qualifications of borrower 1 or borrower 2, depending on how many borrowers are on the deal. So obviously there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to understanding co-signers and guarantors, when to add, who to add, and obviously more importantly, when to add a co-signer or guarantor. So obviously we hope that you found this information very helpful, and if you have questions about your upcoming mortgage or pre-approval and whether or not you may need a co-signer or guarantor, it's important to reach out to your mortgage professional to get a better understanding. And not only that, if you're going to be adding that co-signer or guarantor, it is important to note that a guarantor will need to have independent legal advice, or ILA as we call it in our industry, on signing those mortgage documents. Even if we explain it as a broker to the client, they are fully aware, but on closing of that actual transaction, they would be required to speak with an additional lawyer, or they could be asked to waive that condition of basic legal representation, but it is usually advised that they speak to someone so they fully understand what it means. Now, obviously, looking at co-signers and guarantors, we fully understand that, hey, if you're a co-signer guarantor, what happens if you do not make the mortgage payment? If borrower 1 and borrower 2, for some reason, can't afford to make that payment, who is responsible for the payment? Well, if you're a co-signer or guarantor, all parties, especially if it's reporting to the credit bureau, are responsible for that mortgage payment. And this is a conversation we're having with a lot of our clients who parents are jumping on, is saying, look, if for whatever reason hard times hit, are you able to help your children or help that borrower out? So there are a lot of things to really consider if you're going to consider going on as a co-signer or even as a guarantor. But we'll leave the video here, and we hope that everyone found it interesting and helpful. And if you have any questions, once again, please do not hesitate to reach out to our team here at In Touch Mortgage Solutions. And if you like the content that we're producing here on our Finance Fridays, please don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Helps the YouTube algorithm, helps get this content out to as many Canadians as possible so that they can be fully aware of what it means to be a co-signer or guarantor. But once again, we'll leave the video here. Thank you for tuning in. Wishing everyone a happy Friday and even better weekend ahead. And thanks for clicking. Thanks for watching.